enough enthusiasm from the young people and gather the remnant together to really have a viable political force. And I think the information we're getting this year is that there are a lot of us and that we can convert people and the country is waking up. I am so delighted. Last night we got it in the debate, and today on Wolf Blitzer he gave me another 3 or 4 minutes to talk about something that I think is so crucial, because it's the sinister method of how we have financed this welfare state and this warfare state, and that is through the inflationary policies of the Federal Reserve. We need to get rid of that process. That you understand that issue. I'll tell you what, I've done this on college campuses. 2 come to mind: University of Southern California and University of Michigan, and we get pretty good responses from students at these colleges and universities. That is a good sign. They have a better understanding of what the monetary issue is all about than the individuals I know back in Washington, D.C. Against talking about monetary policy is they claim it's too complex. You know, I think, why would they argue that it's too complex when the argument is that if money is paper and when you need some you print it and it goes down in value, are you bewildered? And that is essentially the whole issue of monetary policy, that we have no restraints on government to create the money. But this is not brand new. The computers are new. They just can do it faster now than ever before, and they can hide the ill effects from it for a little bit longer. But it's not new. In ancient days, they diluted the metal or clipped the coins, and even the Chinese centuries ago used paper money. And all empires and all countries throughout history have always had inflation when they fight wars, because it costs too much if you tax the people for war. So you have to have a way of doing this. They resist the taxes, borrowing is limited, so countries have inevitably used the inflationary process. There were some that existed. Roman Empire, for instance, existed for longer than they deserved by stealing gold. But then they finally got soft and they stopped producing, and they had their bread in circuses, no more gold to steal, and eventually their economic system collapsed because it wasn't built on a viable economic system. And that's where we are today, and we're worse off than we were in the 70s. The 60s gave us a very bad decade that gave us the 70s, and that is that they believed at that time, and there's a few of you will remember the 60s. Those were the years that I was in the military. I got drafted and was called out, but they told us, no sweat, guns and butter, no problem. But then there was a payback, and the payback was in the 70s, and that was what led to the predictable outcome that many Austrian economists predicted, and even when the Bretton Woods was agreed on, individuals like Henry Hazlitt said it's a non-viable system, it will break down, and it did in 1971. That's not a very long period of time, from 45 to 71, that it collapsed. And yet it was always based on this idea that we could create this money out of thin air, and something had to give. But the payback in the 70s was tough. You know, Volcker required interest rates of 21% to restore a type of confidence in the dollar, to furthest deceive the world. And because we had economic strength and because we had a strong military, there was a perceived strength in our currency, and it was restored. At the same time, we went through a period of time, second only to the Great Depression. We had unemployment rates that were 12%, inflation rates, according even to the government, 15%, interest rates of 21%. and a bit of confidence was restored. But today things are much worse. I mean, the spending is much worse. The deficit is much worse. The foreign debt we didn't have before. Now we owe $2.7 trillion to foreigners. To even pay the interest on our national debt here at home is $1.4 billion a day. And then they wonder why people are starting to feel poor, and why young people are getting alarmed at what they're getting. And to keep this continual flow of spending going and these deficits going, we have to borrow over $800 billion every year from foreigners. And this is much different than the 70s. And right now we have seen the shift in the last couple years. The dollar's on its way down. It has been the reserve currency of the world. It's hanging by by a thread, and because we have a military power, even though the creation of new money, the money supply is key, there is a perception that is very important. If there is a perception that we will back our currency with a military might and an economic power, it will convey a certain confidence which will be eventually lost. And that's what's happening. The loss in the confidence of America. And it's because we have done too much, too far around the world. It's reflected in the dollar. So the dollar is a big symbol of what is happening to this country. And there's not a sign that I see that all of a sudden this dollar is going to be restored. Last night I had the brief opportunity to present in about a minute to the answer to the question of why are oil prices so high? What are you going to do about it? You know, that is a magnificent chart that I referred to in the Wall Street Journal on the editorial pages of all places to find good information. You won't find good information on foreign policy, but maybe on monetary policy, a little bit of help. But it is so dramatic of what the cost of oil did in dollar terms, and how dramatic it is that we don't. If you were allowed to be on a gold standard, oil prices wouldn't have gone up. They would have been the same as they were 10 years ago. And this is a whole point that people have to realize, that it isn't so much that inflation is occurring because somebody's being gouged. It's because of the value of the dollar is going down. In certain areas, prices will go up more than others. That's characteristic of inflation. Nobody in the market sort of directs where the dollars will go. Sometimes they go into the NASDAQ stock. Sometimes they go into housing. And sometimes government helps money to go in certain directions. And certainly the government has helped nudge a lot of money into the medical community, in the medical system, the drug industry, the HMOs. And lo and behold, prices have gone up and quality has gone down. And this is not surprising. This is expected. But I mentioned that last night. If we don't understand that there's an inflationary cause to the high cost of energy and to medicine, you know, we can't solve these problems, and this is why the monetary issue is so important. But in a transition, what do we do? How do we get out of this mess? We can talk, and I talk in platitudes and idealism and the Constitution all the time. But really in politics, you do have to come down and say, what would you do and when would you do it? Are you going to wait for the collapse? Or are you going to nudge things over? Or are you going to just close down shop? And for some people, I might be going a little slower than others would like. Some might argue, well, let's just wait and we'll pick up the pieces. But I do believe that you have to make proposals. We want to get rid of the Federal Reserve. There's no doubt about that. We need to before in the meantime, if we can't close the Fed down in one day, why can't we just legalize the Constitution and allow gold and silver to circulate as true money? Gold always wins out against paper, and paper is losing its value. And but we have to change the laws a bit. We can't tax money. You can't say that if you use gold and silver and you want to go out and buy a coin to use and transfer some of your dollars into silver or gold, you shouldn't be charged a sales tax on it. And in the last month or so, gold's gone up $100. Well, should you be taxed $100 capital gains tax on the increase in the value of your money. You can't have that, so you have to change those laws. You also have to be emphatic. Today, if you have a court case and you have a gold clause contract and you settle a dispute, they'll settle it in Federal Reserve notes. If the courts don't recognize silver and gold